Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. So, what have you been up to, Faye, this week?
Well, it's a new month. I have to say I was glad to see the back of April. It was a good month, but a bit of a mixed bag. So I think mayhem is probably the best way to have summarised April. But I'm over it. I've had a long weekend. It's May. I'm feeling very May-ish. And yeah, it's very May-ish. So in answer to your question, last week was super busy. I think people will have noticed if they looked at LinkedIn, there was a lot going on that I was trying to share. So first thing to share, it was the Impulse 2025 cohort. So I spent an afternoon and an evening with them. First of all, giving them my tips on how to network. Again, there's a lot of postdocs, academics, and so networking isn't necessarily their natural habitat. So we kind of had a discussion about some of the key tips, and then we went off and did networking. So that was it was great, really good fun, and such an interesting cohort as well this year from all over the place. Leeds, Norwich, obviously a lot from Cambridge as well, but a good mix of people. And whilst I was there, I actually managed to sit in on one of the sessions, which I've never done before because, you know me, I'm always running around last minute. So I heard Lord Karen Villamoria speak. It was a great speech. He was talking a lot about brand, which is brilliant because obviously that's the area, and not just about having good brands and memorable brands, but living the ethos of a brand. So that was a big tick for me. And he did suggest that he did spent £1 million on an advertising campaign and more on placing it, and it didn't work. So I kind of suggested maybe I could do it a little bit cheaper for him. So you'll see whether he pings me back on that one.
A good demonstration of hustle to the student.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's an opportunity not to be missed. And then I did photo bomb him later on, so I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out for me. Anyway, going back to being sensible. So the Wednesday last week was an ARU and Anglia Ruskin University and Camtrepreneurs entrepreneurship event. So they run these events regularly, literally all around the world. But this one is a new thing that they've set up as an annual event in memory of Peter Cowley. It was just a great event. We were told how to network at that one, which I'm not entirely sure how I felt about that. Katie Tunser, she did this talk about flitters and boulders and personality types, which was really interesting. What else? Entrepreneurs were talking. They really discussed things around highlights of academia and industry speaking very different languages, which, you know, we know very well, and about doing things that have a purpose. And that's like a really, you know, ongoing theme at the moment. And I was at an EY dinner on the Thursday evening, thanks to Ruby Sharoon Khan, and actually the having a purpose and doing things that have impact societally as well as technology seemed to be quite a big theme from last week. So that was kind of my week last week.
God, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted just listening to all of that.
Are you? Yeah. I mean, it was a busy work week as well. I don't know how we fit things in, quite frankly, into the hours in a day. But I was also very impressed to see you in the paper. You were in print last week. Do you know that?
Was I? Which paper? New York Times or?
No, you're in the Cambridge Indie, because we the podcast, and you specifically got a shout out for your interview with Mike Schlom last week. So hark at you.
There you go.
So other than minor celebrity there, what else did you get up to?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've given up trying to keep up with you, so my week always sounds really dull compared to yours. But I'm still on my world tour of mantle sites. So I've been to Stevenage and Abingdon, which was lovely. So yeah, it is nice just to go and see all the different centres, and they're also kind of different but the same, which is fun.
And you asked me a spontaneous question last week, so I feel I should do it back to you. So how many sites has Mantle got? And they are all very different, are they?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the kind of service proposition is similar, but the actual buildings, you know, where they are in the cities, the memberships are all quite, you know, they're all kind of different, which is nice. You know, it's not that kind of uniform feel of everything that you get from some of the kind of more global brands that we compete against. So everyone has a very personal touch and, you know, really close relationships with their membership. So yeah, that's really nice. I think we're up to, is it 7 or 8? God, I'm gonna get fired if I get that answer wrong, aren't I? But
we'll edit that bit. We'll make you look really good.
We'll pick that up in post-production, yeah. But yeah, no, it's fun. We're just looking at how we kind of bring together that kind of community vibe across all of the centres, and everyone does really good jobs. It's just like looking for best practice and sharing best practice. So outside of that, just, you know, lots of interesting meetings and chats. I've been talking to Bidwells, the judge, the Muller Centre, and I had a spontaneous catch up with Amy Weatherup actually in Bradfield. And it's always the spontaneous ones that are fun, aren't they? And also our popular NFL segment returns this week, which I know you're always excited about. So I found another kind of thing to waste all of my money on. So I'm now collecting NFL trading cards, which luckily Michelle will never listen to any of these episodes. So I don't have to worry about that.
I just don't really know what to say. Again, I don't know. Why would you want NFL trading? I just, it's a whole load of things I don't think I need to know. But I'm sure if anyone is interested, then please do contact James directly.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping Chris or Jeff at Mishkondaray are listening, and we can start our little kind of trading card club. So that would be good.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I'm moving us on now. So just before we get onto the news segment, there's a bit of podcast news for you. So I love this. I got an email from the lovely Patrick Pordage, who had run some questions about Monumo through a well-known AI tool. And the result that he then sent me pointed him to the interview that we did with Dominic Regine in episode 59. So not only do we have an ever-increasing audience, we're now a source of information when people ask about finding out about something.
I'm not sure how I feel about this. Are we comfortable with this? Because, you know, if these companies are using our content to train their AI, shouldn't we be getting like multi-million-pound licensing deals in place?
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it. Can I leave that on your to-do list? If you can manage that whilst doing trading cards for NFL, that would be absolutely superb.
All right, I'll pencil that in for next week.
I thought it was good, though. I like that.
Yeah.
Indeed. So on to the news, and we've got a few quick snippets for you. So Sparkcell was named a Change 100 winner for 2024 and was also awarded the Coup de Cœur. Oh, my French has just gone terrible there. For fashion innovation, highlighting its game-changing potential to transform the industry with natural, biodegradable colour technology. So it's really great to see Sparkcell getting that level of recognition. They've certainly come a long way since, and I think they went through a spate of Benjamin went through a spate of doing lots of competitions. So he did the Trinity Bradfield postdoc competition, 21 to watch. So he's still maintaining his winning streak, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Super Sharp and Atlantis have been back in the news this week with their work on telescopes from space. So we should probably get Marco back on, actually, because it's been nearly a year, I think, since he was on the podcast. That was back in episode 94.
Yep. And one close to home for me, Jason Mashinchi has been appointed to the board of Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, bolstering the existing board that we have there and bringing his tech and entrepreneurship prowess to the chamber. So I'm really excited to have him available to us now on the board.
Yeah, I said last week, I think we're turning into lovies with all of these kind of friends and people we keep name checking from their appearances on the podcast. But yeah, we spoke to Jason back in episode 103, if you want to go back and check out the Kinnerbase conversation.
Yeah, and we're also ahead quite often in a lot of these conversations. So I know we've got an episode coming up, and that episode then appeared in the Times the following week. So I'm like, I don't know, I'm going with the fact we're trailblazing here.
We are, yeah. This is why you should listen. Not only you, but your friends, family, colleagues. Everyone needs to be listening because you're going to learn about the hot startups before they break into the mainstream news.
Exactly. Another piece of news, Cambridge Wireless has launched 2 partnerships with industry leaders Ray Castle and Empirical to run more CW Academy courses, the first of which are around AI, telecoms and connected innovation. And more information on those academies and partnerships can be found at cambridgewireless.co.uk.
The Crown Estate has launched a new vision for Cambridge Business Park, which looks set to be a major transformation. So if you're interested in that, you can find out about the second round of consultation, which will be starting soon. And last but not least, KPMG are running their Tech Innovator UK competition, which has been running since 2013, and that celebrates the trailblazers, difference makers and tech entrepreneurs of tomorrow, which I think describes a significant part of our audience perfectly. So the deadline for applications is May 23rd. So search for KPMG Tech Innovator in the UK or follow our link in the show notes.
Perfect. So on to today's episode, and today we're joined by Chris Ellis, who has been a listener with us from the start, but we've actually invited him on because he works as a scale-up director for Innovate UK Business Growth, and we wanted to talk to him a little bit about how to help UK businesses scale at pace.
Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Why don't we start with getting a little bit about your background and your kind of career journey to date?
Yes, absolutely. Well, 4 decades in 40 seconds, maybe. There's a good challenge because I'm definitely in that zone. My first kind of proper job was launching the sister title to Marketing Week in 1986, which was Design Week. So I was cutting my teeth in media and publishing in the West End in London in the late 80s, jumped ship, jumped the fence and went into creative agencies, branding work for businesses in London. And then regionally, we left London to start a family. So was involved in some great branding businesses around here, then had my own business for a decade. And then I was in kind of deep consultancy space with a few businesses. I dwindled it down to retainers with a couple of businesses and had some interim work. And then I got somebody tapping me on the shoulder saying, you'd be brilliant doing stuff with Innovate UK on their support side, coaching and mentoring founders and startups and scaling businesses, because you've got the kind of rounded lived experience and you're commercial, not lost in the science. And I thought, actually, yeah, that does sound quite interesting. So I, 6 years ago, got inside the Innovate UK tent, and at my time in life, now into my early 60s, it absolutely feels like giving back. That's a lovely place to be, in one sense, in career terms, and from a kind of work motivational sense. And I still have the mindset of I have a portfolio of clients, because you know this, once it's in your DNA and the kind of service orientated thinking and time is the enemy and somebody expects you to do something and you've got a bit of a fire underneath you, people actually really like the fact that you're moving at pace and you're not just having catch-ups for the sake of it and all that kind of stuff. So I got into it. I was very happy doing it. And in 2019, somebody proposed that I would be a useful guy on the Scale-Up programme, the Innovate UK Scale-Up programme. That happened. So now my week is kind of split two ways. Some of the week is regionally focused. Obviously, I'm working out of St John's Innovation Centre, which is a fine place for people to start and grow a business. And I'm close to the Cambridgeshire scene. And then the rest of the week, because the Scale-Up programme is a national role, I've got clients from Belfast to Bristol. So I absolutely use planes, trains and automobiles to do that, and good old online meeting where possible. Yeah, that's my life. And if you need me to expand on what that looks like on a day-to-day basis or what typical clients are up to and what the challenges are, I'm happy to do that. Because scaling businesses is really about a focus on executional stuff. It's a word that's so easy to say and often gets flipped around and interchanged with starting up and growing and scaling. But real scaling is a scary place because it's, well, only in the sense way that it's, I always say to people that you're never going to go to a management school and say, can you show me how to manage exponential growth, please? Because it's not really in the curriculum.
Yeah. So let's get on to that. Thank you for the introduction. We have got you on the podcast to talk about the whole topic of scale up. And I think that the point you just made is the right place to start, which is, what is the difference between startup, scale up? What is that definition that we want people to understand? Because what the bank does might be very different to what a business thinks. So for you, working in this space, how would you define a scale up?
Yeah, so for me, they need product in market. They need to be pushing on to 1 million annual recurring revenue, way beyond MVP. I mean, I might still be iterating with bringing new product to market, and that's exactly what they should be doing, because one-trick ponies don't last very long. There'll be probably a rich portfolio of product and service delivery from either knowledge-based businesses or manufacturing-based businesses. The revenues are there, the team is there. They may well put their hands up and say, we could still drop the ball. We don't feel like the finished article, and therefore this is a scary place. And the growth will be close to 50%, if not above. It's easy to get those growth metrics in numbers if you're SaaS, less so if you're converting material into made stuff and manufacturing. So somebody might say we are scaling actually exponentially in revenue terms because we can flick a switch and expose product through APIs, and we've got a SaaS business and it's frictionless and it's easy. And I don't care who owns the term or why they want to use the term, but in truth, the real scaling businesses are probably about scaling people, process, technology, beyond pure SaaS type flicking the switch. It's hard to get, even in SaaS, it's hard to get the flywheel spinning at the velocity that you need to even get the sales at scale in SaaS. You can think you've got it and then you haven't, and that can be a challenge as well.
So let's come back to some of those points in terms of revenue team. How do you actually scale? The one thing you didn't say that I thought you might have done was around internationalisation, expansion, those types of things. So during London Tech Week, Russ Shaw wrote a piece on scale to the world. And so what's your view? Do you think that scale-up should also be looking at broader expansion, and does that have to be global?
Yes, and yes. Yeah, and it was remiss of me to omit it because it's a kind of one of the three key pillars of all the work that we do under the Innovate UK banner. For sure, we're looking for that internationalisation going beyond these shores. That's why we are very closely aligned to organisations like the DBT, Enterprise Europe Network, because we need to know how to take those businesses further afield and internationalise. And it's not just a global market from a trade perspective or a joint venture perspective. If you think about where some of the most amazing seats of skills, knowledge and experience in university settings outside of the UK are, and that the investment influx is totally international. So, yeah, it's a huge part of what we do.
Okay, and you're in Innovate UK. I'm going to be careful how I ask this question. This is something that's backed by the government. Do you feel that the government has a decent enough understanding of what a scale-up is?
Yes, I do. And I think some governments back were smart enough to make sure that the Scale Up Institute was in place. Sherry Kuti, now Irene Graham, championing the work of scale-ups, reporting, lobbying, keeping it in focus, driving an agenda for the scale-up community, and actually trying to do things on the ground across region by region. How do scale-ups come to be, survive and thrive? And the government has sight of them and is, I think, the narrative, the modus operandi or the reason for being for the Scale Up Institute was because there was a recognition that we were great at supporting startups and pretty poor at supporting scale-ups. So it's been on the agenda and on the radar for over a decade. Scale Up Institute's just celebrated its 10th birthday. So that drum has been banging, and I think the government gets it, and I absolutely think they get it off the back of, if you look at recent reports, not just the AI white paper, but where the scale factors in that as a tech play are exponential. And it's absolutely embedded, I think, in their thinking.
That's great to hear. And I know James is going to come on and talk about the Scale Up Institute in a moment. But just before we do, I just want to pick one last piece of the introduction to scale-ups, and that's more around the people and the governance. What kind of things do you see or expect to happen in the boardroom or the culture? What are those dynamics of a scale-up?
Yeah, I've witnessed people grow up pretty quick. If you've got, for a kickoff, if there isn't the kind of corporate governance and grown-up approach to board meetings, board reporting and strategic control, then probably something's not quite right, and that needs to happen, and almost would certainly happen instantly if external investors were involved. The housekeeping, if you like, how does this business run? How does it look back at itself in the mirror and say, are we on track? Are we doing everything right? what could we do differently, continuous improvement type stuff. The traits, the culture, the behaviour, the performance, it's so grounded in execution that without it, you probably would fail spectacularly. And there's loads of examples in this fair city of businesses being given an awful lot of money and failing through poor decision making and not being cognizant of what's in front of them, getting a bit giddy maybe, or just a badly executed idea or a bad idea in the first place from a tech product market fit failure. So the people and their behaviours and their awareness and self-awareness of where they're good and where they're going to hit the buffers and to say, do you know what, that's not me. I was good at doing this bit and now it's not me. So there's a whole kind of piece around self-awareness, and non-exec directors can add huge amounts to that and fill the gaps. Non-exec chairman can be transformational and bring people up. And the disciplines, I was lucky in one sense. My first chairman when I started to work in this part of the world was Martin Rigby, one of the founders of Cambridge Business Angels. So going into board meetings with Martin, not having pre-read something or thinking that I was underprepared as a relatively young man is a great sort of apprenticeship to what it's like and how you need to perform, basically. So I would encourage businesses to get into that behavioural pattern.
So you touched on the Scale Up Institute. Certainly when we were chatting before recording, you were explaining about their industry data, and I thought it might be interesting just to drill into the East of England's data, if you could give us some of the highlights from that report.
The Scale Up Institute produces an annual report. It's a bit of a big bang affair, and it's important for the UK. There's lots of eyes on it when it arrives, but it can be sliced and diced on a regional basis to show you the number of scaling businesses, the number of jobs, total turnover, what sectors they're in, whether it's professional, scientific, manufacturing. Obviously, it's using a bit of SIC coding to do that, what their sort of average growth rates are, the number of unicorns, seven unicorns from Cambridge in 4 different sectors, Abcam, Silicon Radio, which is, we know about, CMR, Darktrace, Centessa, ARM and Quantinium as the cited 7 unicorns. But yeah, it's a rich source of data. Not only does it give you the quant on the numbers and what sectors they're in, but because it's surveying businesses, it's taking the temperature of the founders. So what's keeping them awake at night? What do they want more of, less of? Hard and soft interventions, whether it's peer-to-peer, whether it's access to capital, international markets. It's a useful tool, and it's a good use of that organisation, and it's fulfilling its remit to do that.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, and so just picking up then on, you talked about access to capital, and we've got those examples of the unicorns. Quite often on the podcast, we'll talk about funding at all different stages of the business. So I'm interested to know your views on, is there a funding gap for scale-ups? So Saul Klein at last year's London Tech Week spoke about a $40 billion gap between Europe to the US on scaling capital. Is that what you see, and what do you think we can do about it?
Some businesses need a much longer runway. We know this. Pharma, biotech, bioscience, and often the runway is so long, but as soon as they get past some critical milestones of clinical trial successes, they're acquired even way before they get to market. Others, quantum, deep tech, equally need long runways. And it's interesting, obviously, recently, the new war chest that's been created through CIC, Andrew and the team at CIC, Viva Ventures and British Patient Capital, with that sort of 100 million war chest to look at actually quite specifically a bit of a Cambridge focus for those kind of businesses. And there has been some observations about, are we an incubation nation suddenly, where businesses are getting to a point where maybe there isn't enough VC and offshore acquirers are snapping up businesses at our loss and their gain. It will always require long runways, and it's interesting, there's decisions to be made. I mean, Bicycle took the decision, this is Bicycle Therapeutics, the Miles, etc. They realised what the quantum was and could see that an IPO and an IPO on NASDAQ, as it turned out, was their route for what they needed to do. So I don't think anybody's kidding themselves that some of the tech that we've got that we're dealing with is going to take an awful lot of money, and maybe the pockets aren't deep enough for all the VCs combined. But government needs to probably not let it wither on the vine. But I think that message is getting through for sure.
And I think there are those, like you've just said about IPO, there are alternatives. But I'm just thinking back to a conversation we had with Tony Quested a while ago, and certainly I'm speaking from Cambridge point of view here, we're very good at startups. What's wrong with being very good at startups and letting companies come in and buy them out? Do we just get obsessed that we've also got to be good at scale-ups, or do you think it should always be a mix of all of the different types of businesses?
Yeah, that's a really complicated and sort of rich tapestry, because if you look at the university spin-out, for example, and the STEM-based businesses, and there is data around where we are in the G7 tables with being behind when it comes to VC investment and creation of unicorns based on how many amazing STEM businesses we create as university spin-outs. There's a bit of a sort of strange anomaly going on there, and why would that be in the mix of the G7? Is it sapping that we create them, grow them, and they're acquired by external international businesses? It is, I think, a little bit. I suppose, speaking from somebody who's trying to use taxpayers' money wisely, I and others across the UK that are involved in Innovate UK Business Growth have a remit to support and champion and develop founders who are trying to drive growth through innovation. If all of our endeavours and all that taxpayer money ended up with it being owned and ultimately benefiting somebody offshore, that doesn't sit that comfortably with me personally. That's a personal thought, but you can see how that actually doesn't feel right either, in a way. The people who founded it, if they're sticking around and the employees are still gainfully employed and contributing to the Chancellor's tax revenues, etc., great. But ultimately, it might still be one that got away.
Which, Darktrace is a perfect example brought by Thoma Bravo, but now we've got Poppit in UK government. So, still we have the company here. Some of the operations are here, aren't they?
If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. We also offer a range of high-quality meeting spaces for hire, and for tech event organisers, our auditorium, lakeside pavilion and atrium spaces are perfect to bring your communities together for in-person and hybrid events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.
Okay, why don't we move the conversation on to talk about Innovate UK and the services? Certainly people will be familiar with the grant funding side of things. So could you just, for entrepreneurs that might be listening or budding entrepreneurs that haven't yet taken the leap, what's the range of support services available, the different grant funding and etc. that they can access through you?
Is it just startups, or is the grant funding available elsewhere as well?
Yeah, the grant landscape. So we are lucky to live and work in this country where there is a government agency, Innovate UK, the government's innovation agency, is hands down probably the single biggest backer of early stage R&D and helping de-risk that, whether it's an academic spin out or a bright inventor and entrepreneur finding a gap in a market. That very useful early stage non-dilutive money is a great thing. And you can be in any sector at any time. There comes a point where the questions in the grant application are quite pointedly saying, why do you need a public purse for this? You have to be mindful of how the grants are framed within their thematic calls and what the conditions are associated with them. Some of them, of course, are contributory. 70-30, 60-40. So it's not all free money. So if you might get a 7-figure grant for something, but you've still got to find 40 or 30% of that to execute on the project. And if you can't demonstrate that, you're not going to be able to get all of that and start drawing down. The framework's there. It's not restrictive massively to where you are in the journey. And some are 100% specifically targeted at people who've never had a grant before. So that's nicely targeted stimulus money, and sometimes in underserved, underrepresented communities or sectors like creative or whatever. It's there, but I always say to people, hope is not a strategy. the old adage. So what happens if you don't get this grant money? Talk to me about the capitalisation thinking for this business. How does it generate revenue for a kick-off? That's the best form of finance any business can ever have, as we know. But in the interim, maybe as it's trying to cross those chasms, whether it's 1, 2 or 3 of them, what happens? How does it stay on track? What types of funding are available? Debt is really out of reach for lots until they're revenue generating. So, yeah, you've got to think wisely about the mix, the blend, and it's part of that kind of grown-up thinking about how is this business going to stay on track? What is the fuel in the tank? Where's it coming from? And how nimble and efficient do we have to be to do that? And everybody knows bootstrapping's fun and a little bit hand to mouth, but you can't do that forever. So you asked me what does an Innovate UK Business Growth support intervention look like? And it's really just coming alongside founders to say to them, you seem to be driving growth through innovation. You have ambition to internationalise. You may or may not have had Innovate UK money. You are absolutely in the crosshairs for us to spend time with you in a fully funded way, and we will help you try and knock over these challenges, maybe to do with IP, go-to-market strategies, joint ventures with international partners. We've got so much connectivity, and actually most of the innovation advisors have had useful lived experiences and know a thing or two perhaps about some specific domain areas or just generalists. And so it's a moment in time where we go on a journey with people and we add value. And I would liken it to if you were talking to somebody who was saying the bulk of my business is going to come from export, we will be shipping abroad. You would look at them quizzically if they didn't have an international trade advisor in their life. It's a kind of go-to. You need one of those in your life. So if you're doing stuff with innovation, you really ought to find an Innovate UK Business Growth innovation advisor, because they'll just add value. There's no ulterior motive. They've got no other remit other than to try and add value. And they're super connected. See things in their inbox that you'll never see, and useful to pull on the rope, really. Nice to be seen as an extended member of the family of an executive team or a leadership team. And obviously at the scale-up end, you're almost operating in a kind of quasi non-exec director way, because you're with the board and having some pretty grown-up conversations about chunky challenges.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message to get over, is the fact that it's fully funded, there's zero catch, you're there to help. It is worth having a coffee to kick off that conversation. It's a no-brainer. The question I was going to move on to was, recently the Department of Trade came to the Bradfield and ran a little round table with some of the founders of businesses here just to gain feedback on the processes, on the grant funding in particular, which, first of all, you've got to give credit that they're actually actively listening. That was going to be my kind of question to you. What kind of feedback do you get from founders? Because playing back what I heard in the room was things like there's complexity around the application process. There's that elapsed time to find out if you've been successful. In fact, I learned that it's created a whole bridging loan industry around getting the money in the bank account after you've been successful on the loan. So what are you hearing at the ground level, and how do you feed that back? Have you seen government respond to that and adjust and innovate how they're delivering these kind of services?
Yes, the market has been creative. People like Dom at Spark Capital have created products that are almost like a bridging finance on drawdown for, or it could be grants, or it could be R&D tax credits. If you know the money's coming and it's government money, it's good money to lend against, in one sense, smart business play in that. And that's not born out of market failure. That's born out of spotting a gap in the market and cash flow management and just being smart about it. I would say businesses who are desperate for non-dilutive grant money will want it as soon as possible, because there'll be a project, or they're trying to move a technology readiness level along to get somewhere quicker, sooner, faster, and get product to market. Because it's never there for, it's not working capital in terms of business as usual money or marketing money. It's dev money. Yeah. It's predicated on research and development stuff, even if it's late-stage R&D loan money. So there is, again, Innovate UK being creative in the marketplace and having a loan book against late-stage R&D. So it goes back to my point about, talk to me about your capitalisation journey. Can I see that you're thinking how you're going to keep this show on the road? You might be annoyed that grants are difficult to win, and obviously there's a pause in smart grants at the minute, which were always the most difficult to win because they're non-thematic open calls, and anybody who's trying to do something innovatively could apply for a chunky piece of money. But they're having a rethink about how they work, the remit and probably the quantums. But the thematic ones, if you're working in, I don't know, biomedical, quantum, deep tech, thematic funding calls against some of the big industrial challenges, it's definitely worth going. I think you just have to, I'd say, get good at explaining things in a language that your grandmother can understand, but in a compelling narrative arc, because bid assessors are like anybody else. They've got some domain expertise, but actually what they want to be is excited by something that they think is worth the public purse. So get good at writing in a style like The Economist, short, sharp, punchy sentences, and don't get lost in jargon, tech speak, and all that sort of stuff. So suck it up, do it. We do critique some grant applications. We're not there to be bid writers, but we try and add value with critiquing them. It's just part of the landscape.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice and on succeeding on grant writing, because you spend a lot of time writing them, so you want to have the best chance of succeeding. So talking about more advice from you now, we referenced boards earlier on, and I also said we'd come back to some of the dynamics of scaling. So things like team, sales, KPIs, those types of things. In your role as a business advisor, what do you think are the key things that you see that scale-ups should be looking at doing?
So they definitely need a people plan, finding good people, because unless the transactional side of it is knowledge-based SaaS, probably more people are going to be involved. So scaling people, scaling businesses is a real challenge, and they're difficult to find. Everybody knows that. The people plan side of it you need to be massively on the front foot with that. I think also just the whole process of scaling is some of the most important people in scaling businesses are the COOs. Keeping the people, process and technology absolutely flying at full tilt is so important. You might have a charismatic CEO who's actually happens to be a great salesperson as well, but I would imagine behind all of them there's a very competent, capable Chief Operating Officer as well. And the other board posts, obviously the fiscal disciplines. I see a lot of pitch decks, and the ones where there isn't somebody right across the numbers, OPEX modelling, looking 3-4 years out at the numbers, always makes me think, I'm not sure they've really got a view on exactly where the black holes in this cash flow are. So the key people, the right people in the right place, that structure is almost, you could say that's a given. And I think the focus on execution, the discipline, you just have to make things happen, and time is the enemy. Drift is a bad thing, and why aren't we doing it? What happened? That kind of holding each other to account. I always tell the story of the Red Arrows. Whenever they do a training flight, a show, the first thing they do when they get back down on the ground is they sit down and tell each other, and it starts with R1, the squadron leader, what they thought they did wrong and how they could improve the next time they went up in the air. And if all boards sat down and did that, constructive criticism is not the enemy. Being continually the best versions of yourself is that's a good quality. And also keeping a sense of perspective about it and not losing sight of the fact that, look, we're supposed to be having fun doing this. We probably started this business because we were passionate about something. If you see that kind of spark go and it's turned into a bit of a dull, the spark's not in the boardroom, I think that would be an interesting dynamic as well.
So you touched on in the intro that actually you've got a nationwide remit. So this feels like a good opportunity to maybe do a quick whistle-stop tour of the UK and maybe call out what you're seeing in other cities or from other universities, any highlights. And I'll come on and talk about the government resurrecting the Oxford to Cambridge ARC discussion as well. So what are you seeing around the UK right now?
I think the change of government took the sting out of the kind of levelling up political debate that was going on, but it's still needed. And I suppose from a money flow perspective, there's probably still too many funders, VCs, angels in the south compared to the north, or there's some brilliant ones in Lord Jim O'Neill and his work over in Manchester, etc. They're now closely aligned to the Cambridge Business Angels. That's a great story. And there's some amazing funders, etc. up in Scotland. And maybe if you overlaid that map with the great seats of learning, plotting down the kind of red bricks and the Oxbridges and down, that might correlate a bit. I think the recent announcements to do with the Cambridge-Oxford London Magic Triangle, and more cash flowing into that region and super cluster and the innovation hub, etc., is amazing for us. I think I'm hoping there's a kind of overspill into more than just that area, though. And I see there's people doing amazing work to stimulate growth and celebrate their own successes in their own clusters, whether that's, Ross Bird over at Norwich Research Park, etc. There's so much amazing stuff going on there. Our near neighbours, our kind of close neighbours, we are blessed to live and work in this part of the world. But I see the work of the government, I see the work of supporting actors, whether that's Scale Up Institute, growth hubs, trying to stimulate scale and growth all the time. It does happen. There's maybe an imbalance of money, but there's no imbalance of ambition and desire to do that. And long may it continue.
And we talk a lot about Cambridge being well known for life sciences, medtech, biotech, deep tech. Are you seeing other themes in other cities, or is it quite diverse?
It is diverse. I don't know. I couldn't say hand on heart city by city, although there are more, let's say, more creatively grounded cities, whether that's art, music, culture, than others. But then you've got other things going on where there's stimuli. If you look at the work of the Set Squared down in sort of Cornwall, Devon, there's amazing innovation, maybe to do with tidal wind energy. They're stimulating, they're harnessing, excuse the pun, what they have and trying to do the right thing by the skills and resource that they've got there. It's always been quite a rich tapestry, hasn't it, across the UK?
Chris, it's been great talking to you today. I think this is the start of a lot of conversations on scaling up. I know, for example, we had Michaela on talking about Cambridge Tech Week, and there's a day this year that is Startup to Scale Up. So I think it's very timely you joining us. My last question to you is going to be, where can people go to find out more information and get sources of help?
There's a huge thing here about place. Where would I start my business for a kickoff? And it would be remiss of me not to say, I think environments like St John's Innovation Centre is a fabulous place to start a business, nurture a business, to be surrounded by fellow startups and with lots of support, and the same way Bradfield environment creates that as well. So being in the mix of all of that in this region is really important. And you might think, can I afford that? Should I do that? Shall I just start at home? But I think as soon as you can get into an environment where you're meeting fellow founders and the cross-pollination that goes on, the organic cascade of knowledge share and good stuff that just happens when you're in the right room with the right people, you can't put a value on that. So I think where you are in terms of place and starting is really important. And then be smart enough to say no to some people. And I come across people who are what I would call advice junkies. And then you end up with business decision-making paralysis through analysis. So be disciplined enough to know when you can have some people who will go on a journey with you for all the right reasons, and be grown up enough to know when it's your time to make the big decisions and to surround yourself with paid people and people on the payroll, etc., etc. But plug into the people from Innovate UK, from the CPCA Growth Hub, and particularly Chris George and the team, brilliant. Don't overlook the Enterprise Europe Network. It's still out there. That's on our doorstep. Innovate UK, we're part of the Enterprise Europe Network. We're still a kind of associate member. I can't remember what the correct term is these days, but we are moving and sending knowledge and people and connectivity out into real people in real offices across the whole of Europe, because that's still there. So find the pathways out into the ecosystems. If you're trading internationally, as I said, international trade advisors are super important. Use the websites. Cambridge is a bit spoilt with networking as well. You can go and network every day, maybe twice a day. So be selective about your time and be productive, and keep asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I trying to get out of this? What's the outcome? I like to encourage people that we support to swap out the word innovation for outcome. What is it you're trying to do here? Where will the value exchange happen? What's the transactional side of this wonderful thing that you're talking to me about? And that's my old instinctive salesman in me saying, where will the money change hand? Who cares? So be disciplined enough to think like a consumer who you want to sell to, whether that's in a B2B sense or a B2C. It's important in the round to think about where you are, who you're with, and where you're going.
Great advice. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And yeah, we'll definitely be talking more about Scale Up moving forward.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.